My sister announced to the entire Thanksgiving table that I was still single at 34. What she didn't know was that I'd been married for 8 months. And she was the reason my family never came to my wedding. That's when things got interesting. Charlotte leaned back in her chair that Thursday afternoon, swirling her wine like she was in some kind of movie. The smirk on her face told me exactly what was coming. Still single, Savannah? At 34, that's rough. She said it loud. Loud enough that Mom dropped her serving spoon. Loud enough that Dad's fork froze halfway to his mouth but said nothing. Loud enough that even Trevor, her husband, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. No one said a word. No one defended me. I felt something crack inside me. Not break, I'd been breaking slowly for years. This was different. This was the sound of me finally having enough. I set my fork down. Looked directly at her. I wouldn't worry about me, I said. I'm married. Silence. Complete, absolute silence. Mom's face went pale. Dad's jaw actually dropped. Even Charlotte, who always had something to say, just sat there staring at me. And I hadn't even gotten to the best part yet. Let me back up because you need to understand how we got here. I grew up in that house. Same creaking floors. Same family photos covering every wall, though if you looked closely, most of them featured Charlotte. Same pine candles Mom lit every holiday like the smell alone could convince everyone we were the perfect family. But we weren't. From the outside, sure. We looked great. But once you got close, you could see all the cracks. The way every conversation somehow ended up being about Charlotte. The way Dad went quiet whenever there was any kind of conflict. The way Mom's whole face lit up when Charlotte walked into a room, but stayed neutral when I did. For years, I told myself I was imagining it. Kids do that, right? They make up stories to explain why things feel off. But somewhere between my 20s and my 30s, I stopped making excuses. The pattern was too clear. When I graduated college, my parents didn't come. Charlotte had some sorority event she couldn't miss. They said it was an unfortunate overlap. I sat in that auditorium watching other families take photos, hugging their graduates, crying happy tears. I watched a girl 2 seats down get a bouquet of roses from her mom. I watched fathers hoist their daughters onto their shoulders for pictures. I sat alone in my cap and gown and told myself it was fine. It wasn't fine. When I turned 30, I planned a birthday dinner. Small thing, nothing fancy. Just wanted my family there. They canceled 2 hours before because Charlotte needed help touring wedding venues. You understand, right? Mom had said on the phone. You know how important this is for her. Like my birthday was just another Tuesday. Like turning 30, a milestone that felt both terrifying and significant, meant nothing. I ate dinner alone that night at the restaurant. The waiter felt so bad he brought me a free dessert. A stranger showed me more kindness than my own family. When I bought my condo in Seattle, by myself, no help from anyone, I sent photos to the family chat. I was so proud. First-time homeowner at 32. I'd worked double shifts, saved every penny, sacrificed so much for it. They never even asked how it felt to do that alone. Never asked for a tour. Never asked if I needed help moving in. But when Charlotte bought her place, with Trevor's family money, they drove 3 hours to help her unpack. Spent the whole weekend there. Posted photos on Facebook about family time. I saw those photos. I didn't comment. But here's the thing. Despite all of it, I kept showing up. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas. 4-hour drive each way. I'd bring pies, flowers, gifts. I'd smile and nod and pretend it didn't hurt. Nolan, my husband, used to watch me pack for these trips with the sad look on his face. You don't have to earn a place that should already be yours, he'd say. I'd laugh it off. But deep down, some broken part of me wondered if maybe I did have to earn it. Maybe I just wasn't enough. Maybe if I tried harder, brought better gifts, smiled wider, they'd finally see me. Nolan would shake his head. Savannah, you're enough. They're just not looking. I wanted to believe him. But belief is hard when you've spent 34 years feeling invisible. Walking into the house that Thanksgiving afternoon, I felt that familiar tightness in my chest. The entryway looked exactly the same. Heavy mirror Mom loved. Coat rack leaning slightly to the left. That faded rug Charlotte had ruined in high school with red wine, somehow she never got in trouble for that. I remembered that night. I'd spilled juice on that same rug when I was 12. Mom had been furious. Made me scrub it for hours. But when Charlotte ruined it at 17, stumbling and drunk from a party, Mom just laughed it off. Accidents happen, sweetie. Different rules. Always different rules. But I wasn't the same person who'd scrubbed that rug. Something had shifted in me over the past 8 months. Some quiet part that stopped hoping they'd notice I wasn't okay. Mom hugged me with one arm while stirring gravy with the other. Savannah, sweetheart, you made it. No questions about my drive, my work, my life. Within 30 seconds, she was already talking about Charlotte's honeymoon plans. How they'd gone to Bali. How the resort was incredible. How Trevor had surprised her with a private beach dinner. I'd gotten married on a beach too. Small ceremony. 20 of our closest friends. Nolan's family. My coworkers who'd become like family. It was beautiful. Simple. Real. My family should have been there. Dad gave me a tired smile across the table. He looked older than I remembered. More worn down. I wondered if he was happy. I wondered if he ever thought about the daughter he'd spent 3 decades ignoring. I looked around the kitchen. Charlotte wasn't there yet, but her presence was everywhere. Wedding photos covering the fridge like a shrine. Big white dress. Expensive venue. Her and Trevor looking perfect. My wedding photo? Not a single one. Not even a small printout tucked in a corner. My stomach dropped. 8 months. 8 months since I'd gotten married. 8 months since I'd sent those invitations, made those calls, sent those emails. 8 months of silence from my entire family. I'd cried about it. A lot at first. Nolan held me through those nights when I couldn't understand how my own parents could miss my wedding. How they could just not show up. Maybe they didn't get the invitation, he'd said, trying to find excuses for them. But I'd sent 5 physical mail, emails, text messages. I'd called and left voicemails. There was no way they didn't know. Unless someone had made sure they didn't. Mom glanced over. You did bring the cranberry sauce, right? Of course. That was my role. Show up. Contribute. Stay quiet. I set the dish down and realized something unsettling. This was the first holiday where I wasn't sure why I'd come. Habit, maybe. Or that tiny, stupid hope that this time would be different. But I already knew the truth. It wouldn't be different. Not unless I made it different. Charlotte breezed in 20 minutes late. Her heels clicked across the hardwood like she owned every step. She kissed Mom's cheek, hugged Dad like she hadn't seen him in years, then looked at me. Just looked. Barely a nod. Like I was some distant acquaintance she couldn't quite place. Traffic was insane, she announced, shrugging off her coat. Trevor's parking. Lawyers don't get holidays off, you know. She said it like being married to a lawyer made her special. Like his accomplishments were somehow hers. Mom's eyes actually sparkled. That's what happens when you marry someone successful. The words weren't aimed at me directly. But they landed anyway. Nolan was successful too. He ran his own business. He was kind, brilliant, hardworking. But they didn't know that. They'd never asked about him. Never asked about my life at all. We moved to the dining room. I heard Charlotte whisper something to Mom. Soft enough to hide, sharp enough to cut. Mom laughed, that quick, brittle sound she made when she was uncomfortable but didn't want to show it. Dad cleared his throat in that familiar way. The one that meant he'd heard something he wouldn't address. By the time we all sat down, the hierarchy was already set. Charlotte at center stage. Me as background noise. It was a role I'd played my entire life. Spoken over. Brushed aside. expected to absorb whatever casual cruelty slipped out. But something was different this year. The words didn't sink into the same old place. They bounced off something harder, something I'd been building without realizing it. Boundaries. Self-respect. The knowledge that I deserved better. Mom launched into a recap of Charlotte's wedding. Again. She never got tired of reliving it. The venue had a 2-year wait list, but Charlotte found a way. And the flowers, oh, Savannah, you should have seen them. Breathtaking. I had seen them. Twice. Online. Because I wasn't invited to the rehearsal dinner. Wasn't asked to be a bridesmaid. Was barely acknowledged at the actual wedding except when Charlotte needed someone to hold her bouquet while she fixed her makeup. Charlotte smirked, swirling her wine. Yeah, it was perfect. Everything went exactly the way it should. Honestly, I don't know how anyone could top it. A pause. Not that anyone's competing. My jaw tightened. Flashbacks hit me. Mom leaving my 8th grade recital early to pick up Charlotte from practice. Dad missing my scholarship dinner because Charlotte needed help with a project. My high school graduation where they spent the whole time on their phones because Charlotte was texting them about some friend drama. Birthdays, graduations, every milestone swallowed by Charlotte's orbit. And the worst part? I used to excuse it. I used to believe they didn't mean it. But watching Charlotte's smile sharpen every time our parents laughed, I felt the truth settle in my chest. She wasn't careless. She was deliberate. She enjoyed this. The attention, the favoritism, the power of being the chosen one. And as she clinked her glass, eyes glittering with the comfort of being untouchable, I knew what was coming. This time, I wasn't going to swallow it. Dinner started normally enough. Dry turkey. Overcooked green beans. Mom fussing with the gravy like she could fix the entire family dynamic by whisking harder. But the air felt heavy. Every clink of silverware sounded too loud. I sat in my old spot across from Charlotte. The seat where I'd learned to make myself smaller. Trevor arrived and slipped in beside her. He gave me a polite smile, the kind people offer when they're not sure whether to acknowledge you or ignore you. I'd met Trevor twice before the wedding. Both times, Charlotte had monopolized the conversation. I knew nothing about him except that he was a lawyer and came from money. He seemed nice enough, but he'd married Charlotte, which meant he either didn't see her cruelty or didn't care about it. Charlotte leaned into him immediately, voice bright and theatrical. 4 people was enough of an audience for her. As plates were passed, Mom kept steering every conversation back to Charlotte. Her honeymoon. Her new apartment. Her holiday plans. We're thinking about going to Trevor's parents' place for Christmas, Charlotte said. They have this massive estate in Vermont. It's like something out of a magazine. Mom practically swooned. Oh, that sounds wonderful. What about you, Savannah? Dad asked suddenly. Everyone looked surprised that he'd spoken. What are you doing for Christmas? It was the first question anyone had asked me all day. I'm not sure yet, I said. Probably working, Charlotte cut in. You always work holidays, right? I used to. Because I had nowhere else to go. Because coming home meant feeling invisible. But I didn't say that. Then Charlotte turned her full attention to me. So, she said casually, spearing a piece of turkey. Savannah. She stretched my name out, sweetened it until it turned sour. At 34, still being single. Is that a choice now? Mom inhaled sharply. Trevor put down his fork. Even Dad looked up. I felt the comment hit, but not the way she intended. It struck something solid this time. Something long past boiling. I wiped my fingers on the napkin. Looked at her fully. That's interesting, I said softly. Why do you assume I'm single? Charlotte blinked. Thrown off for just a second. Well, are you not? The room paused. Waiting. I heard that old hallway clock ticking unevenly, like it wasn't sure it wanted to keep going. I set my napkin down. I'm married. Silence. Complete, paralyzing silence. Mom's spoon froze midair. Dad's jaw tensed. Trevor stared at Charlotte like waiting for direction. But Charlotte, she laughed. A quick, patronizing sound. Right. Married. Sure. To who? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. What mattered wasn't her disbelief. It was that I'd finally said it out loud in the one place where they never expected me to have anything worth announcing. Mom leaned forward, voice low. Savannah, darling, if you were married, you would have told us. I did, I replied. No, honey, you didn't. I did. I repeated it calmer this time. 8 months ago. Their faces fell in sequence. Confusion first. Then denial. Then something sharper. Fear. Because if what I was saying was true, then they'd miss something major. Then they'd have to face what that meant about them. Charlotte scoffed, but I could see her shoulders tightening. Come on. We never got anything. Not an invite, not a call, nothing. I held her gaze. You didn't get them because someone made sure you wouldn't. Her smirk twitched. Excuse me? Mom's voice trembled. What are you implying, Savannah? I didn't answer her. Instead, I reached for my phone. Slid it slowly onto the table like placing a card in the middle of a poker game. Charlotte's hand went rigid around her wine glass. She knew something was coming. Maybe not what, but enough to recognize the shift in power. Dad swallowed hard. Savannah, what are you talking about? I tapped the screen and opened the first file. When the light from the phone reflected off the silverware, the room seemed to tilt. I'm talking about the invitations, I said. The ones I mailed. The ones that were signed for. The ones that never made it to anyone but her. I didn't point at Charlotte. I didn't have to. Every eye at the table landed on her automatically. Her lips parted. Her shoulders stiffened. That mask she'd worn perfectly for so long finally cracked. And I hadn't even shown them the proof yet. I didn't rush. I let the silence wrap around the table, thick and suffocating, while Charlotte's fingers tightened around her glass like she could squeeze the truth back into the stem. This is ridiculous, she muttered. Nobody got anything from you, Savannah. If you were actually married, which I doubt, you would have made sure we knew. I turned the phone so everyone could see the screen. I did make sure. The first record was simple. A tracking history. 5 envelopes. 5 destinations. Delivered. Signed for. All on the same morning. April 23rd. Dad leaned closer, squinting. Signed by who? I zoomed in. The signature wasn't just familiar. It was unmistakable. A looping C that trailed into a tight scribble. Charlotte's signature. I watched the color drain from her face before she forced a laugh that didn't belong in her throat. Anyone can sign for mail, Savannah. Delivery people mess things up all the time. They didn't, I said. Because I checked twice. Called the post office. Spoke to the carrier directly. And he confirmed it was received at this house. He even remembered because someone answered the door in pajamas at 11 in the morning. Charlotte's face went red. Mom's eyes flinched at the word confirmed. Dad's breathing grew shallow. Trevor glanced between them all like he'd suddenly been dropped into a conversation he didn't understand. I swiped to the next screen. Email activity logs. The electronic invitations. They were opened from this house's IP address on April 24th, then deleted 30 seconds later. Mom clasped her hands. Maybe your father opened it by accident. I didn't. Dad said it abruptly, voice cracking. I don't even check that inbox. Haven't in years. That alone was a revelation. Dad rarely contradicted Mom. Almost never in front of company. Mom's gaze darted to Charlotte. Sweetheart, do you know anything about this? Charlotte straightened her spine. No. A single syllable coated in ice. But her eyes betrayed her. They darted left. A tell she'd had since childhood. I wasn't finished. I opened the call log next. I called on May 4th, May 11th, May 18th, 20th, 25th, June 2nd, June 9th. I listed them slowly, letting each date settle like stones dropped one by one into a well. Voicemails. Texts. Even a message in the family group chat asking if everyone got the invitation. Dad frowned. Group chat? I'm not in a group chat with you. Mom said the same thing. You were, I replied. Until May 7th. Someone removed me that day. I showed them my phone. The chat history. The message that said Savannah was removed from the group. That landed hard. Even Trevor shifted in his seat, looking at Charlotte with something new in his eyes. Doubt, maybe. Charlotte, Mom whispered. Charlotte slammed her palms onto the table so suddenly the silverware rattled. Why are you attacking me? Because you didn't get the attention you wanted? Because your life isn't as exciting as mine? I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so familiar. The deflection. The arrogance. The certainty that if she refused responsibility loudly enough, everyone else would fall in line to protect her. I'm attacking you? I asked, voice calm. You're the one who made sure my wedding happened without my family. Her jaw twitched. I didn't do anything. Yes, you did. I said it firmly. You signed for the mail. You opened the emails. You deleted them. You removed me from the group chat. And you let me think for 8 months that I meant that little to all of you. Mom gasped softly. Dad closed his eyes. And Charlotte, she broke. Not all at once, but in tiny fractures I could finally see. You're so dramatic, she snapped. You always have been. You take everything personally. I got married, I said. And none of you came. That stopped her. Stopped all of them. Dad swallowed. Savannah, why didn't you call again? Or come in person if it mattered that much? A spark of old pain lit inside me. But I didn't raise my voice. I did call. Over and over. I sent reminders. I texted. I begged. I gestured to the logs. I chased the people who should have been chasing me. I did everything except show up at your door and drag you to the ceremony. And honestly, part of me thought about doing that too. My voice cracked. But I realized something. If I had to beg my own family to care about the most important day of my life, then maybe they didn't deserve to be there. Mom pressed a napkin to her lips like she could blot out the truth. We had no idea. Her voice wavered at the edges. The first crack in the story she wanted to believe. But Charlotte wasn't done. Maybe, she said quietly, maybe the invitations weren't meant to be seen. The words fell like acid. Mom stared at her. What does that mean? Charlotte's eyes flickered with something between panic and pride. It means, she whispered, that it wasn't a big deal. Her little beach wedding. 20 people. Come on. She looked right at me. I wasn't going to let her ruin the momentum before my wedding. My wedding was in June. Hers was in April. Everyone was already focused on mine. The dress fittings, the venue, the planning. I worked on that wedding for a year. She said it like it justified everything. I wasn't going to let her steal my spotlight. Dad froze. Mom's hand slipped from her mouth. Trevor blinked like he'd never truly seen his wife before. You threw them away? Dad asked, voice trembling. I didn't throw them away, she snapped. I just kept them from distracting everyone. From making things complicated. I was getting married, I said. It was supposed to be my year, Charlotte shot back, louder now. My time. I'd been planning it forever. And you just suddenly decide to get married? Out of nowhere? I'd been with Nolan for 3 years, I said quietly. But you never said anything about getting married. You never talked about it. And then suddenly there's an invitation? 2 months before my wedding? I stared at her. So you made sure no one knew. I made sure nothing interfered, she corrected, like there was a difference. And mine didn't count? I asked quietly. She looked right at me. Eyes glossy. jaw tight. No. It should have hurt more. Maybe once it would have destroyed me. But in that moment, it clarified everything. I see, I whispered. Mom turned to Charlotte, voice sharp for the first time in years. How could you? Charlotte recoiled. Don't make me the villain. Savannah has always been jealous. Always wanting what I have. Always trying to compete with me. I never competed with you, I said. Yes, you did. You went to the same college I applied to. You moved to Seattle after I talked about moving there. You got a condo right after Trevor and I started looking for places. I shook my head slowly. I went to that college because I got a scholarship. I moved to Seattle because I got a job offer. I bought a condo because I was tired of renting. None of it had anything to do with you. Then why the beach wedding? She demanded. I told everyone I wanted a beach wedding first. You got married in a ballroom, Charlotte. Not on a beach. That stopped her. Because it was true. She'd talked about a beach wedding for months. Then she'd seen some venue in a magazine and changed her entire plan. But in her mind, I'd still stolen something from her. That's when I understood. It didn't matter what I did. It didn't matter how small I made myself. She would always see me as competition. As a threat. And my parents had let her. Mom was crying now. Soft, quiet tears. I'm so sorry, Savannah. I'm so sorry. If I had known. You should have known, I said. I called. I tried. And when you didn't hear from me after the wedding, didn't you wonder why? Didn't you think it was strange that I never mentioned it again? She had no answer. Because the truth was, they hadn't wondered. They hadn't noticed. I was so used to being invisible that my absence didn't even register. Dad spoke, voice barely above a whisper. What was his name? Your husband. Nolan, I said. His name is Nolan. What does he do? He owns a consulting business. Where did you get married? Seabrook. On the beach. Was it beautiful? I looked at my father. Really looked at him. Saw the regret in his eyes. Yes, I said softly. It was beautiful. He nodded. I wish I'd been there. So do I. That was it. The moment I felt something inside me settle with absolute clarity. I'm not jealous of you, I said, looking at Charlotte. I never have been. I'm hurt. And I'm done pretending it doesn't matter. I stood. My chair scraped against the tile. A small, final sound that sliced through the room. Where are you going? Mom asked, almost panicked. Away, I said. Away from a table where I've been invisible my entire life. Dad rose halfway, reaching out. Savannah, wait. Please. We can fix this. I shook my head. I spent 8 months waiting. Waiting for someone to notice. To care. To ask why I'd gone quiet. I'm finished waiting. As I turned toward the front door, Charlotte spoke again. Raw. Shaky. You ruined Thanksgiving. No, I said softly. You ruined my wedding. This is just the truth catching up to you. The hallway felt colder than the dining room. Like the house itself didn't want me to leave. But I did. I walked past the mirror. Past the photos. Past the place where every version of me had once tried to belong. And when I stepped outside, the night air hit my skin with something that felt like freedom. Behind me, through the window, I saw them. Frozen. Stunned. Staring at the empty chair where I'd sat for decades. For the first time, they had to look at the space I left behind. For the first time, my absence mattered more than my presence ever had. I drove the entire way back to Seattle in silence. The road stretched out like a clean line between who I had been and who I wasn't willing to be anymore. When I walked into our apartment, Nolan didn't ask questions. He just wrapped his arms around me, grounding me in a way my own family never had. It finally happened, I said into his shoulder. He nodded like he'd been waiting for this moment. And you finally said what needed to be said. I pulled back. Looked at him. I told them about us. About the wedding. About everything. How did they take it? Not well. He smiled sadly. I'm proud of you. Those words. Simple words. But they meant everything. Because no one in my family had ever said them. The days after were strangely quiet. Dad called 3 days later. Brief, cautious conversation. But a real one. He didn't defend Charlotte. Didn't rewrite anything. He just listened. I'm sorry, he said. I should have paid more attention. Should have noticed. Yeah, I said. You should have. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was honest. Can I meet him? Nolan? I paused. Maybe. Eventually. Okay. His voice was soft. Broken. Okay. We talked for 20 minutes. About my job. My life. Things he'd never asked about before. It was new. Unsteady. But new. Charlotte emailed a week later. A long, apologetic message that sounded like therapy had pressed honesty out of her. She admitted what she'd done. Said she'd been jealous. Said she'd always felt like she had to be the star because that was the only way to keep their attention. She said she was sorry. I read it. But I didn't reply. Healing wasn't a door I could walk through on command. And her apology, while maybe genuine, didn't undo 8 months of hurt. Didn't undo a lifetime of being second best. Mom stayed silent. And for once, her silence didn't tear me apart. It clarified things. She'd made her choice long ago. I'd just finally stopped pretending it would change. Nolan's family invited us over for their Thanksgiving the next day. His mom hugged me at the door. His dad asked about my work. His sister wanted to hear about the wedding. Laughter filled the house. People asked questions. Listened to my answers. They saw me. And as I sat at their table, passing dishes and sharing stories, I realized something almost frighteningly simple. This felt like home. In the weeks that followed, the ache softened into something I could finally set down. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But clarity. I wasn't the forgotten daughter anymore. I was someone who chose her own peace. Her own family. Her own life. And that choice felt steadier than anything I'd ever begged my parents for. Christmas came. Nolan and I stayed in Seattle. We cooked dinner together. Watched movies. His family came over for dessert. It was quiet. Simple. Perfect. No drama. No favoritism. No fighting for scraps of attention. Just peace. I posted a photo on social media. Me and Nolan. Happy. My mom liked it. Didn't comment. Just liked it. It was something. Dad called on Christmas Eve. We talked for an hour. He asked if we could visit in January. Meet Nolan properly. We'll see, I said. Because I wasn't ready to forgive. But I was willing to see if things could be different. Charlotte didn't reach out again. And I was okay with that. Some bridges burn. And sometimes, you're the one who needs to light the match. Thanks for listening, and if you liked this story, share it with others, and don't forget to comment and subscribe for more stories about family, boundaries, and finding the courage to choose yourself. Sometimes the family you choose sees you clearer than the one you were born into.